So we want to help people encounter God. And so one of the ways we do that is in his word. And we're going to be in Luke 5. And God's word is going to just change people today. And he does his thing. And I try to just get up here and be faithful to him and let him move. I just want you to be open. I want your heart to be open. And if your heart is open right now, then that's a miracle. That's a miracle of grace. And I'm really thankful for that. And so I just pray it'll remain open for this time and that you'll stay focused. Because this is good stuff. This is God's word. And I believe Jesus has about 4 things to say to us this morning. 4 words. They're simple words to say to us this morning. And I want us all to hear them. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at Jesus, who started actually getting some momentum. When we started with Jesus, he got baptized. And that was cool because he had this ecstatic experience of the Holy Spirit coming on him. And he was just overwhelmed with grace. And then he went out into the desert, gets tempted for 40 days. And that's kind of a downer. But he was victorious. He defeated Satan. He defeated temptation. He comes out roaring. Then he goes to his hometown, tells them about, the gospel. And in his hometown, they want to kill him, throw him off a cliff, and throw stones on him. So here you go. Jesus goes from pretty good to pretty bad to, oh no, this whole ministry is not going to work out. And so then today, he actually gets his new posse. He gets his new crew. Today, in the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 5, he calls disciples because he pretty much lost his hometown. You lose your hometown, you better get some friends quick. And so Jesus was getting some friends, and he was able to do so, but he had to sort of get them from the rabble, the poor in spirit, the fisherman, the average guy, the tax collector who was known to be an outcast. He had to get his crew from people that aren't substantial, people that don't quite have their act together. He had to get his crew from people, who might not be so perfect, who might not be so religious, who might not be so educated, who might not be so this and that. He had to get his first disciples from people of that quality. So I just wonder if he's still kind of doing that today, getting folks from the average bunch like us, or is he looking for the perfect? Because if you were today kind of hoping that you could be perfect and that he would choose you because you're so special, I think today you're going to learn that the people that thought they were special ended up trying to kill Jesus and eventually did kill him. And the people that didn't think they were so special ended up getting chosen by him. Does anybody want to be chosen by the Son? Do you feel yourself, do you feel yourself so unworthy? Because Jesus is like, I am going to make you worthy, and I'm going to choose my crew from among the people that feel themselves to be unworthy. So that's the jam that we're rocking today in Luke chapter 5. It's in the New Testament. If you can't find it, we're going to have the verses on the screen, so you ain't even got to worry about it. But here we go. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land so that he could have a stage. He was trying to get a stage because everybody was pressing in around him. He was trying to teach them. And so he said, you know what, I'm going to get in a boat, and I'm going to just go out a little bit, and that way nobody can tackle me. And I can actually get the message across. So Jesus was a preacher. And so he gets in one of the boats, which was Simon's in verse 3. And he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep and let your nets for a catch. Now this is kind of in front of everybody, one of those times. When the teacher calls on you, hey, Johnny, what do you think? Tells him to do this and tells him to do it in front of everybody because he's teaching, right? He's got an amphitheater right in front of him. He's on a boat. Everybody's right in front of him, in front of the amphitheater here. And not really an amphitheater, but just the shoreline. And he tells Peter to cast his net over to the side. And Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. He was like, I don't believe you. I think I'm wasting my time here. I'm not convinced. I'm skeptical. I'm frankly just don't believe, but it says here, I'm going to trust. But I'm going to trust. He says, Master, we toiled all night, but at your word I will let down the nets. And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. So I'm imagining the guys on shore, the second boat that was mentioned, get in their boat. They come out to help Jesus, not Jesus, but Simon Peter, and Jesus is with him in the boat. And they help them get the fish. And they came and filled both boats. So they're just like picking up fish and chunking them into boats and nets. And, fish are flying everywhere. And it's like a great fishing show. And they came and filled both of the boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. Dude Perfect's just YouTube channel that they just kind of do some cool stuff. And you would think here the disciples would be like, whoa, Dude Perfect. He got a whole boatload of fish. But for Peter, no, he actually encountered God here. This was more than just a miracle that was really cool. This was, oh no, I'm in the presence of God. And that's why he bows in the boat, shaky, I guess. He bows down in the boat. Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. He encountered God. Verse 9, for he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. So they were partners in business. And Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men, which is anthropoi in Greek, which means men and women. And when they had brought their boats to the land, they left everything and followed him. Story number one. Story number one is Jesus gets some disciples, but he had to really put some investments in. And actually, the first disciples that he gets, he made them rich. If you see the Chosen, Simon himself had some bills to pay. And that's a apocryphal addition to the text. It doesn't say that Simon had bills to pay, but if he did, that's kind of a good day. Or, Jesus gives you a whole bunch of fish for you and your buddies. And so they cash in a serious way. And he gets these disciples to be his own. I'm going to read another short story here, we're going to compare them, because in the Gospel of Luke, it's not just one story to the next, but the stories actually talk to each other. And unless I preach two stories, then you won't get how Luke talks to you. And Luke is very smart, and he'll put two stories together just so that you can compare and contrast. So this is the story of the call of Levi, a second call story where he gets some more disciples, some more following. Verse 27. After this, he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax booth. Now, tax collectors were outcasts because they were viewed to be traitors. And he said to him, follow me. Dude just says, okay. And leaving everything, he arose and followed him. He probably saw the miraculous catch of fish story. He arose and he followed him. And Levi made a great feast in his house. So Levi throws Jesus a party. He cashes in. He says, you know what? I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to buy a ton of food, and I'm going to have a party. And there was a large company of tax collectors. So he invites all his buddies and others reclining at the table with him. Jesus is starting to get overwhelmed with people, but they're not exactly the type of people that are going to get you anywhere. And the Pharisees and their scribes grumbled. They're like, oh, great, look at this guy. Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Isn't that the religious spirit? Why do you hang out with those people? That's Karen, right? Karen. That's a Gen Z way of saying a Karen, not anybody in here. Oh my goodness. And verse 31 says, and Jesus answered them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Ooh, this is mic drop. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And he shakes the dust off his feet, and he's like, walking away. Doesn't even care, you know. It's just these guys. He didn't come for those guys. I didn't come for well people. I'm a doctor. I came for sick people. I'm a minister. I didn't come for righteous people. I came for unrighteous people. And I'm thinking, I'm reading this. I'm like, that's really good news. Because I happen to be unrighteous sometimes. And I actually grew up and was born with a tendency and a bent towards evil. And here we find Jesus, who's God in the flesh, hanging out on earth, wanting not only to forgive my sin, but to associate with sinners. He's chilling, having drinks with these guys, eating and enjoying life. Jesus is my hero. Verse 5, the first story here in chapter 5 and then the second story are talking to each other. And Jesus is going to say 4 things to us today. First thing he's going to say is, trust me. Trust me. Isn't it interesting that Levi, all he heard was follow me. And Levi said, okay. Because Levi, even though he had a lot to lose, he didn't. Because people that are already disrespected and outcast don't have much to lose. And so those who don't have much to lose gain so much more because they're willing to go out and follow Jesus. And so this guy who had not really much to lose, I suppose, but in a sense he did, because he did leave his tax booth, and who knows who he left his little cash box with, but he just darted and he started following Jesus, so excited about this new guy, that this new guy would actually go after and touch him. And he said, I'm going to trust him. In his heart, he knew he could trust that guy. In his heart, he knew he could trust that guy. Do you feel that way? People wonder, when is God going to call me? When is God going to call me? You know that the voice of God can be very subtle sometimes. And the voice of God is just like, follow me, man. And some people, we were talking about this at man night in my house on Friday. It was like, some people have this experience where God takes a board and just gets them, you know? But look at Levi. What does he get? He gets 2 words, follow me. And I wonder how many of you follow me is what he's been telling you, but you haven't been listening. Jesus this morning, he's given us the words. He's bidding us all follow. He's bidding us all. And with Peter, he says, I want you to go ahead and cast that net. Peter's like, but I'm skeptical. I don't believe. I'm not one of those guys that can just believe anything. Because I've been working all night and I have like 100 casts, which came back empty, and I have 100 proofs that it's not going to be any different, but because you said so, I'm going to do it. Jesus says today, just trust me. Because you said so, I'm going to actually listen to you. You ever been in that situation where you actually didn't believe, but you trusted? And I didn't even know that there was a difference between the word belief and trust. But I figured out in this story that there is. Because Simon Peter believes in Jesus, but he believes, but he doesn't believe, but he trusts the person. He doesn't believe the circumstances. He can't even believe what's going on, but he trusts the person of Jesus. And so he just says, fine. And Job was another guy in the Bible that God allowed Satan to afflict, and he lost his whole family. And then he says, though he slay me, I will trust him. That kind of faith, man, is amazing. Though he slay me, I will trust him. Peter was like, I'm just going to trust him. So number 1 today is a very simple message, just trust me, but it's also one of those messages that comes across not like a screaming preacher, but like a still small silence, where God is just subtly telling you, trust me, which is what he said today too. So maybe God's talking, the preacher says it, he said it. Well, this is something that needs to be said today, trust me. He says, trust me. That word follow, you can't follow somebody that you don't trust. And Jesus says follow. And isn't it nice that he says follow rather than like another word he could have used like study, Sometimes Christians think that they're just supposed to study him. It's kind of like they read about swimming in the Bible. They study swimming with, watching videos of people swimming, and they just never get in the water. And that's the problem. Jesus is very practical. You want to start following me? Start taking steps. You can study, and you should study, and that's a good habit. But the point is orthopraxy, not orthodoxy. Orthodoxy means right teaching. Christians all the time want to talk about being right. But how often do they talk about walking right? Because Jesus says, walk right. Walk with me. Start moving, man. Hear the subtle voice, and you'll get a louder one. Let me just say, follow me. And if you don't hear that, then I'm just going to hold back until you hear that first. Follow me. Trust me. Orthopraxy means right practice. Orthodoxy means right doctrine. You've all heard of the word orthodoxy, but Jesus is not all about just what you know and what you've studied and how smart you are. If you look at this story, the smart people got rebuked. Jesus said, I want you to follow me. So step number 1 in how to follow Jesus today is simply trust me. There's a great song that I won't sing. Number 2, do not fear. Do not fear. Peter was told, do not fear. Why would he tell him that? Because Peter had just says, get away from me. I'm a sinful man. And everybody in the Bible that encounters God ends up saying something to that effect. Oh no, God is here. I'm sinful. And let me just fall to my feet. Falling down is a great approach to hearing from God. And so Peter, he's like, okay, I'm about to get down in this boat, or I'm about to jump off this boat, but I am actually in the presence of God. And he felt it, and he went down and confessed and worshiped. That was his response to Jesus. And Jesus tells him, do not fear. Now, why would he tell him, do not fear? Because he's scared out of his mind. And so he tells Peter, do not fear. And Peter has this encounter with God, and he hears from God, do not fear. And then Levi wonders if he's allowed to associate with Jesus as he's throwing a party with his buddies, and then outsiders say, you're throwing a party with Jesus and you're a tax collector, and that's just wrong, and he's supposed to be a holy guy. This thing doesn't mix. I don't understand. And Jesus, in so many words, also says to Levi, do not fear. I've actually come for people like you. Do not fear. I don't just forgive sinners, I associate with them. Do not fear, because these are the people I actually came to be with. I want to be with these people. He's not going to stiff arm you, keep distance from you. He's saying do not fear. Many of you, you've decided you're not even going to follow because you're trying to clean up your life first. You're trying to clean up. How silly is that? Consider that for a second. You're trying to clean up your life. He wants to clean up your life. Let me ask you a question. Do you catch fish first, or do you clean them first? Do you catch fish first, or do you clean them first? And you're thinking, I got to clean myself before I get caught. And God's like, I'm so confused at you right now. I'm not going to let you clean yourself. That's my job. Do not fear. I came for people like you. You thought yourself to be so bad and so off, and your record is so terrible, and God's like, this is so great. You're one of these big fish that's got a lot of skin and scales, and we're going to clean you up if you'll just let me hook you. And so he wants to drag you in the boat, and he's going to take you to the shore, and then he's going to clean you. I remember growing up feeling like I can never change. And I deal with my son. He screams his head off, and I say, you cannot scream your head off, or I will have to discipline you. And he says, I can't help it. And I'm like, you better help it. And so I have to do the work of a father and take care of business. And so I believe in discipline. But at the end of the day, I know when I've been in that position, I felt helpless against the power of sin that was on top of me. And I couldn't escape it. But over time, I got clean. Over time. The scales got taken off. Over time, I became good for something. Because I said, go ahead, let's catch Ross. And I just stayed in the boat. And over time, I look back over 2 years, and I'm like, oh, I can't even make fun of that guy now. And people would tell me, Ross, think, think. When I was young, they would always tell me, Ross, think, just wake up, think. I'm like, how do you think? How do you think more? I'm like, you just focus on thinking. I'm like, well, my brain's not working. Why can't I just wake up? Why can't I think? I can't think myself. God is saying, I want to catch you. Do not fear. Stay in the boat, Peter. Don't jump out of the boat. Wouldn't you just kind of hang with me for a while? For a couple years, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, what in the world? I don't even know who that guy is. Because God is going to clean you. Do not fear to come. It's time for you to take a step. Trust me. Do not fear. Get in the boat. Don't wait any longer to go ahead and take one step. You take one step, then it turns into two, then it turns into three, and then it starts to feel like a relationship. Do not fear. And Jesus has something else to say, number 3. Because I am number 1. He allowed Peter to leave his whole operation to follow him. And he thought that was a good investment. If you start to leave your business practices and decide you're going to follow me, I'm kind of scared because I don't know if I can lead you. But Jesus is saying, yeah, that's a good cause. And Jesus actually let people worship him. He let people cash in their whole social capital. Look at Levi. Levi's like, yeah, I'm going to invite all my friends over, and we're going to have a party for Jesus, and I'm going to totally cash in all my social capital on this one guy. Levi, that's putting all your eggs in one basket. You might want to introduce him to just one of your friends, and then see how that goes, and then introduce him to maybe another friend, and kind of ease into this thing. But Levi says, no, I'm going to give it all to Jesus. Because he's number 1. And Jesus has a word today. He says, trust me. And Jesus says, do not fear, but come on and get in the boat. And here he says, I'm number 1. And some people who are narcissistic, they don't like that. Maybe you think Jesus is narcissistic for saying I'm number 1. He doesn't mind you making sacrifices for him because he knows he's worthy. And he's okay with you using your life to glorify himself. I want you to feel that. I want you to feel the bodaciousness of this guy. That he will allow you to give everything to him. Because he truly is God. And that is how we best live our lives. But you're like, I want to do me. And this is my life. And you're so used to saying that. But it's just frankly false. The reason why he can receive everything that you give him is because he's the one that made you anyways. And clue, he knows better how to live your life than you do. And he knows why he made you. And ever since I was in the 6th grade, they started telling me, who are you going to be when you grow up? And I remember getting this pamphlet, and it's like taking a test and figuring out what your skills are and figuring out who you're going to be when you grow up. And we tell people, when you grow up, you're going to be this and that. And what are you going to be when you grow up? And what are you? And it's all about you, isn't it? But it's not. It's not about you. And actually, you discover you insofar as you cash in on him. And you won't even know who you are until you go to him. And they're not going to tell you that at school because it's just illegal. They can't tell you that. But the secret they should have told me in the 6th grade is quickly find your way to Jesus, and then you will figure out who you are. And Levi realized, and Simon Peter realized that day, I'm not a fisher man. I'm a fisher of men. He realized that he was worthy. And look at how he ranks things. He actually ranks himself and his kingdom higher than your career. And he's okay if you give up the one for the other. Now, I don't think Peter sold his fishing boat. He actually goes back to fishing at some point. But he changes his whole orientation. And he's all about the kingdom now. He's all about Jesus now. He's not about Peter and Simon Peter. He's actually even not about fishing anymore. He might fish, but he's not a fisherman. He's a fisher of men. God has changed his orientation. So work is good, and work is from God, but work is second. Work is not your primary who you are. And when we go to people, the first thing we ask is, what do you do? Because we're trying to figure out who you are. So we think identity is connected to vocation, when identity is connected to who created you. And that is where you find who you are. And that is what Jesus experienced in his baptism, when God says, this is my son, whom I am well pleased. And so Jesus knew who he was, and he was able to live his life because of it. And the same for you. He said, I am number one. You're going to have to let go of some things. I remember in high school, it was like, I'm getting way into this religion thing. And if I keep going down this direction, I might not be wealthy when I grow up. That was my logic. And because, I was like, religion doesn't pay well. Sometimes it pays none, and sometimes it leads to, a cross. That's how it worked out for Jesus. Of course, then he inherited everything, and he's the richest guy in the world now. But on this side of the grave, it doesn't always work out. If you go down this religion gap, and I was starting to read my Bible, I was like, I'm going to follow Jesus, and I'm starting to tell my friends about Jesus, and I'm like, wait a second. And I remember going down Shoal Island Road, looking to my right, and I saw the graveyard. And I'm like, time for me to die too. I used to tell this joke as I go down Shoal Island Road, and I look at the graveyard, and I tell the person sitting next to me, people are dying to go there. Okay, bad joke. And I said, it's time for me to die too. And I remember I was going down Shoal Island Road. I looked at that graveyard, and I said, I'm done. I don't have to have it. I don't have to have it. I don't have to have the dream. I just let go of me pursuing wealth. Just let go of it. And it is amazing how early that little boy jumps on you. You're real young, and you're like, I got to have money so I can have power. My kids learn the power of money when they're 3, and they start saving when they're 5. And they realize, and it gets on you, and I was like, I got to let this thing go. And God could not use me until I did. And I just let it go. And I said, it's time to just make it about him, because he is number one. Doesn't mean I never had wealth after that. It just means that now I'm on the receiving end. And I'm not on the I'm going to reach out and grab it end. I'm on that let's let God bring it, rather than reach out and take it, and rather than make my whole life about it. And these guys had to leave the tax booth, and this guy had to leave his fishing, and they had to become new people who now put Jesus in the spot of number one. It's time to let go of some things so that you can make Jesus number one. Jesus has a couple words for you today. He says, trust me. He says, do not fear. He says, I am number one. And then finally, he says, go after people. He says, go after people. He told Peter, you're going to catch men. He actually reoriented him towards the bigger, higher calling. You thought your career was just sales. Do you not now know, if you come to Jesus, it's actually going after people? You may be a salesman, and I recommend that you do an awesome job at it. But you're now oriented towards the kingdom, because God has called you, and Jesus has gone after you. And he's tagged you, and he said, trust me, and you've responded, and he's changed you, and now, whatever it is you do, you're going after people, because that's what Jesus does. He goes after people. And he says, he's starting the Jesus movement, and the Jesus movement reorients everybody towards people. Levi, what is the first thing he does? Is he goes after people. He goes to his house, he gets things ready, he invites his friends over, and he says it's time to party for Jesus. It's like a worship service, a bunch of sinners, tax collectors, prostitutes. people crazy, bunch of sinners hanging out with Jesus, listening to Jesus, and having a party. That's a worship service. He went and threw a worship service. He went and just said, let's do this now. I'm going to make my life and my ministry about people. I'm going to change it from tax collecting to people collecting. And he reoriented himself completely towards people. There's two approaches that Christians take, and one of them is called quarantine. And the world is so bad that you just can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's like, oh, it's scary out there. It's cold. Don't go outside. And so you never risk getting frostbite because you never go outside. And so you're quarantining. It's the Christian approach called quarantining. Some whole denominations are known for quarantining. The Amish or the Mennonites, for instance, they quarantine. It's like the world out there is going to bite me. So I'm not going to go after people. I'm going to just stay in here. I'm going to quarantine. And so we say, what about Jesus? You know, he didn't quarantine. There's quarantine, and then there's this idea of outreach. Are Christians supposed to lean away from the world or lean toward it? Because you sort of have to do both, because Jesus was able to lean in, but not actually become the world. He would lean in far enough to get frostbite, and then it would change. Instead of getting frostbite by them, they would get frostbite by him. And so he was able to lean away, but also lean in, and somehow he did it where he wasn't quarantining. Most holy men have to hide out and quarantine just so they won't sin and do bad, and they can be holy for God. And Jesus says, I'm not that kind of guy. We're going to go after people. We're on mission. This is the ministry model. We're going to lean in rather than away. Lean in's close enough to where you risk actually being frostbit. There's a guy, Kent Brantley. And Kent Brantley was a medical missionary in West Africa. I think it was Sierra Leone. And Ebola broke out. And so Kent Brantley had to make a decision about whether it's time to pack his bags and go home, or whether or not he's going to stay and fight Ebola. Because if you get Ebola, chances are you're going to die. So don't take it that seriously, Kent, you know? This guy actually turned out to be Time's Person of the Year in 2014. And it wasn't because he packed his bags and went home when Ebola broke out. But Kent Brantley, when Ebola broke out, he invited the Ebola people to come to his clinic because he was, at that point, the only hospital in the entire country that was actually helping Ebola, that could help Ebola. So he said, if I ditch now, he's like, that ain't cool. So Kent Brantley's like, it's time to do this. It's time to cash in. It's time to throw that party for Jesus. It's time to leave the fishing nets behind. It's time to make a change. It's time to trust. It's time to walk forward. It's time to actually live this thing out. So Kent Brantley said, I'm just going to stay. I'm just going to stay. And people with Ebola start, do what people with Ebola do, throwing up and dying on him. And he's helping them to the bitter end, seeing many, if not most, die, but being able to save some. And then a little girl comes into the clinic because her mom has Ebola. And the little girl has to help her mom go to the restroom. Now, Kent has all of his gear on, and he's got his mask on, because you don't want to catch Ebola and just be willy-nilly cavalier with your life, right? Well, then the little girl needs to talk to the doctor after she gets back taking her mom to the bathroom. And she has to talk to the doctor, and the doctor had a decision to make. He's like, but he didn't even make a decision. In a split moment, he took off his mask, he bent down, he talked to the girl. And that was the moment where he got Ebola. And Kent Brantley, now he's got Ebola. Good thing, though, that in the hospital where Kent Brantley gets Ebola, there's actually a medicine for Ebola that's only been tested on rats. It's never been tested on humans, but they have a pretty good indication that if you take this medicine, this is just like some sort of drama. Life is such a drama. If you take this medicine, then you will actually recover from Ebola. And so everybody was happy. We've got the medicine. We'll save Kent Brantley. So they said, Kent, here's the medicine. Well, it just so happened that the nurse that was working for him was further down the road with Ebola. And so Kent Brantley said, well, let's make the logical decision here and give this medicine to the nurse who has Ebola now for many days beyond me. And so hero Kent Brantley, who gets Ebola, then takes the one little bit of, what is this, a movie? Takes the one little bit of medicine and he gives it to the nurse. See, Kent Brantley went after people. You see, Kent Brantley leaned in, and he got so close to the people, he actually got infected. And I wonder if Christians know how to be like that, where you'll lean so far in that you're going to actually get dirty, that you'll lean so far in with other people that you're going to get uncomfortable, that you're going to be inconvenienced. People think about their comfort 100% of the time. And if you meet Jesus, it might cross your mind, I'm supposed to be going after people. And I'm supposed to be leaning in and not away. You're not supposed to be in quarantine. Open up the doors. Let the fresh air in. Let the people come in and dirty your perfect house. You can. That doesn't mean be stupid and be cavalier, but it means lean in and don't quarantine your life. Jesus says, if you're going to get a part of my movement, I want you to lean in. And Kent Brantley's like, I'm going to lean in. Ebola comes to the country. He's like, who cares? And then he says, I'm going to talk to this little girl. He gets Ebola from the little girl. And then he gives the Ebola medicine to this woman. And she ends up surviving. He gets through the door of death and makes it across the other side without dying. And so he's Times 2014 Person of the Year. And he happens to be a Christian. And that's why he did what he did, because he went after people. Jesus is saying this morning, very simply, trust me. Take the step. Even if it doesn't make sense, and even if you don't even believe, you can still trust me. Do not fear. Do not fear. Go ahead and stop trying to clean yourself up, but jump in the boat. Let's go together. I am number one, and I'm worth all the sacrifices that you are going to now make for me. And now that we're in business together, I want you to go after people. And that's what this table calls you to. Take a step. Trust him. Go after people. What do you need to do today? What kind of decision do you need to make today? Because Jesus is like subtle. He's not going to like yell at you. He's like, follow me. And he may be saying that to you today, and it may be your time. And you're like, but I can't. Well, that's the thing, is he can, and he will meet you there. For those of you who are dealing with all sorts of other things, you come into the table today, and you're hearing him say, follow me, and you're agreeing. And that's what this table is about. This is his body, his broken body on the cross for you. Because guess what? Jesus got so close to the world that he actually got infected too. And it killed him. And it was your sin. And he's like little Kent Brantley, but big Kent Brantley, and he's the one whom Kent Brantley wants to be like. And so he leans in so far, he actually gets the disease, gets killed, dies for your sin, crucified for your sin and your own righteousness and for your infirmities, and now risen again for your salvation.